The job of diplomats representing the United States in a foreign country isn't always glamorous. In fact, in many cases, it has proven to be a dangerous undertaking. That fact was laid bare in a Middle Eastern country that most Americans knew nothing about. Before that time, terrorism was something that happened overseas, and the word Ayatollah was not part of the American vocabulary. All of that would change, however, as the year 1979 drew to a close. On November 4th, 1979, a group of Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 90 people captive. The majority of them, 66 embassy personnel, were Americans. The students, supporters of the revolution that had overthrown the government of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, were afraid that the CIA, who had originally put the Shah in power, would attempt to overturn the revolution. They threatened to kill the hostages if any rescue was attempted. By November 20th, any non-U.S. hostages, as well as a small group of American women and African American men, were released, seen as oppressed minorities by their captors. Only one other hostage was released nearly 7 months later, after he became seriously ill. The 52 remaining Americans were held captive at first in the embassy to be used as a bargaining chip by the new Iranian government, who demanded that the former Shah, who had gone to the U.S. for cancer treatment, be returned to his homeland. During the chaos, 6 Americans managed to escape the attack, finding refuge in the Canadian embassy. Ambassador Ken Taylor granted permission for the 6 to be given shelter until arrangements could be made to help them leave the country. The rescued Americans, described to embassy staff as visiting Canadian tourists, were split into 2 groups, with 3 Americans remaining in the ambassador's residence and the other 3 sheltered in the home of Chief Immigration Officer John Sheridan. Within 2 months, Canadian passports were obtained for each of the 6, showing them to be Canadian filmmakers. Soon after, flights were booked for the morning of Sunday, January 27th on a Swiss Air flight. As backup, seats were also booked on other airlines as well. Using their fake passports, the 6 Americans boarded their plane without issue, though the plane's departure was delayed. Later that same day, the 6 U.S. diplomats who had evaded capture touched down safely in Zurich, Switzerland, before eventually returning to the United States, escaping the chaos of Iran. Negotiations for the release of the remaining 52 Americans began between the 2 countries with a secret meeting in Paris. When these negotiations fell apart, advisors to President Carter began to push for a military solution to end the crisis. As the hostage crisis entered into its 6th month, with little hope of reaching a favorable conclusion, Operation Eagle Claw was launched. This mission, on April 24, 1980, consisted of a joint military force sent into Iran to rescue the 52 American hostages. The plan called for a group of 8 helicopters launched from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz to rendezvous with a group of C-130s at a staging area in the desert outside of Tehran. The helicopters would then transport troops from those aircraft to a location in the mountains, from which the rescue mission would be launched the following night. Problems surfaced from the very beginning, as 3 of the helicopters experienced engine problems after encountering severe dust storms. With only 5 helicopters remaining, hindering the ability to transport the troops and the hostages, it was decided to cancel the mission. During the withdrawal, as the pilots traveled in radio silence, one of the helicopters collided with one of the C-130s, killing 8 service members and injuring 5. This decision resulted in embarrassment for the U.S. and led to Iran's decision to remove the hostages from the embassy, scattering them around the country in hopes of thwarting further attempts at rescue. They would face imprisonment as well as mistreatment for another 270 days. President Carter, in a press conference, took full responsibility for the mission's failure. A second rescue mission, codenamed Operation Credible Sport, was planned but never carried out after one of the modified aircraft that was slated to be used crash-landed during a practice run on October 29, 1980. Weeks later, after President Carter lost his bid for re-election, the mission was scrubbed. Negotiations resumed in November 1980 after the presidential election, this time brokered by the Algerian government. The resulting Algiers Accords were signed on January 19, 1981, with the U.S. promising to free nearly $8 billion in frozen Iranian assets, with Iran's promise that the 52 Americans could finally go home. On January 20th, after 444 days in captivity, the hostages were finally released. The Algerian airliner carrying the Americans took off as the oath of office was administered to Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States. 10 days after they arrived back in the U.S., the 52 former hostages were given a hero's welcome, a ticker tape parade in New York City. Thank you, as always, for watching our look back at this story of the pivotal event from our history, the Iran hostage crisis. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel, and keep an eye out for our next episodes, which are coming soon.